Monitor, and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Jacksonville is up on the docket, and what a tricky handicap again. We are 3 for 3 with AFC South. How do we feel about this team? And the Jaguars are especially interesting because this is a team that I was very bullish on heading into last season. It wasn't necessarily, I mean, it was a little bit like, ooh, now you add Calvin Ridley to an already, kind of up and coming young quarterback on a rookie deal. Like, man, Trayvon Walker, if he's a first overall pick, if he, lives up to his draft pedigree, this defense could be sick. And oh, by the way, they're in a division with potentially 3 rookie quarterbacks. They should coast. Fast forward. Oh, yeah. And then you look at their schedule and they're like, and one of the toughest games of their schedule, the Bills have to go to London and play them there. Like, if they could just win that game, like, this might be a team with 1 seed aspirations. And Andy, let me tell you, after they defeated
8-3,
yes, after they defeated the crafty Houston Texans on the road, week 11 or game 11, it might have been week 12. They were 8-3, and people were literally buzzing. Are the Jags going to steal the 1 seed? Spoiler alert.
There was they did not make playoffs. There was a moment in time, I believe, where they controlled their destiny because of who they played.
Yes, they did.
Because
they controlled their destiny a lot.
Yeah, it was. I mean, even later than what that moment in time you just posited. Weird, and yes, there was some. It wasn't all just them pissing it down their leg. There were injuries. Once you lost a tackle who was, important on a weak enough line already, and then you started to get, Lawrence was picking up a different injury every 9 days. He was finger. He missed a full game. There was one game where it's like, there's no way he's going to play. I mean, obviously, we remember him getting helped off the field.
There were a couple of them. He had a torn MCL from what we heard.
Yeah, he had the knee.
He played through it. I don't know if he ever had surgery on it or if that just healed on its own. It was partial tear, obviously. Crazy.
Well, I mean, a lot of that impacted how the end of the season went down for sure.
He had a shoulder too. For sure, he had a shoulder. Also, right?
I think it was shoulder, knee, finger thing, and then
the shoulder seemed to impact his performance. I thought the most because the knee thing. I remember hearing the knee thing before the Saints game, and then he went out there and was like scrambling for 20 yards against the Saints on Thursday Night Football in a short week. So who the hell knows?
And to be fair to him and the rest of this team, there was a bunch of playoff teams after that. It was week 12 when they played the Texans. They had week 9 bye. There were some playoff teams. There was. And I know the Bengals.
They went 1-5. If they go 2-4, they make the playoffs.
Yeah, the only team they beat from there on out was the Carolina Panthers in the second to last week, where Carolina was not going to score for the last 2 weeks. So lost a close-ish one, depending how you watch that game. The Bengals lost to the Browns, lost to the Ravens. Can't fault them there. Didn't really put up a very good fight versus the Bucks. That was in Tampa, 30-12. Got their win, and then I think it was winning in, if I remember right.
It was. Yeah. They would have gotten the spot that the Steelers ended up getting. Yep. Which obviously they got their doors blown off by the Bills, so it wouldn't have mattered one way or the other if it was Steelers or Jags, probably. But Jags missed the playoffs, and now. There's a little bit of divisiveness, it feels like, about this team because they had to pay Trevor. He is now the highest compensated or tied for the highest compensated in terms of AAV, tied with Joe Burrow. And so the window to win a Super Bowl with a rookie quarterback deal is closed. And I think in general, people look at the way they were priced heading into last season and they're like, man, every market believed in these guys and now they don't. Is this an opportunity to buy low on a team that has some true blue pedigree in terms of at least draft capital? But I thought in general,
I thought so, Drew. I thought
Yeah.
so. But I mean, just a quick spoiler for the rest of this show. Every time I was tightening up these positional group ratings, I found just a huge crack where it's like, oh no, I'm high. I'm a little high on this one. And when you're a little high like 6 times in a row, suddenly you get to the end and be like, I don't rate this team all that well. And there's a lot of things that could go right with this team that bring them right back into the fold of a team that can make the playoffs. But there is a really, really big disconnect between how we've seen successful teams build a roster around a rookie quarterback on a rookie quarterback deal and how it's been done here in Duval. Because this is just not a roster that I'm super enamored with this is how you get it done. This is how you become one of the top 7 teams in the AFC. It's weird. It's a weird squad for me.
It is. This is a tough one. And I ultimately think going to the just general thesis of their schedule was easier on paper than it ended up being last year, and the injuries bit them in the ass, and in general some of the way that the team has been rostered has turned out to be failing decisions, has ultimately cost them really emerging as the contender in the AFC the way that you thought they could after winning a playoff game and giving the Chiefs a modicum of a scare 2 years ago. So, I think if you ask enough people, some people will say this is an underrated team. Some will say it's overrated. Football Almanac has them 8.5, so exactly average. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming down to. If they had an easier schedule, I would maybe say yes, okay, this is an opportunity to get on board. But ultimately, now you look around in AFC South, and what was once a bunch of inexperience and youth and quarterbacks that have no quarterbacks that have no pedigree. Well, now it's a bunch of up and coming or like guys in their second years, and one of the favorites.
And one of them's really good.
Yeah, one of the favorites for MVP now, and CJ Stroud. So the shoes, all of a sudden, the wind has changed, and Duval is going to be struggling for relevancy in a very crowded and very talented AFC South all of a sudden. So Interesting. Anything else about their 2023 campaign that you thought was notable to bring up on the pod?
Yeah, you were not only, we're going to talk a lot about Houston when we talk about any of these teams because that's the biggest hurdle, but you're pretty high on Indy. I was kind of high on Tennessee's defense. This is suddenly, I think that's such a big point you brought up where went into last season like, oh man, we're in the catbird seat. Everybody else has like these young quarterbacks. Everyone has a rookie or a very inexperienced quarterback. With Tennessee, it was more like eventually they will. And now it's suddenly got a lot harder, and they didn't probably make this team all that much better. So I'm kind of out on. I know we're going to transition to offseason here soon enough, but I think that's the biggest story here is what was the offseason? What was the offseason for the last few years? What was the plan here? Because it just feels like another offseason that I wasn't so keen on. And I know I'm not great with like contract stuff because honestly, I just don't give a shit about that. I can't be bothered to spend the time figuring out the ins and outs of it. But even somebody who doesn't care that much understands like the Ridley stuff was weird. How they essentially just, why did we do that if we weren't going to re-sign them? And why are we giving these guys contracts, and why are we choosing to build things this way? So out on the GM is kind of my main takeaway here. Like Balky might be, I don't know, failing in a lot of senses.
Yeah, and I mean, I honestly think that the signal's been there about Balky for a while, right?
Yeah. And then also just the fact that, the collapse was quarterback injury, tackle injury. We had some injuries in the secondary. We weren't getting quite enough out of the pass rush all the time. And the decision in the offseason was to lay it on the DC. Like they just kind of cleaned house on the other side of the ball. And maybe there's going to be some improvements, but man, there is a ton of turnover on that side of the ball from a coaching standpoint. There's a bunch of question marks there too. So, I think he got worse probably in a coaching standpoint. You got worse probably on offense with your skill position players, and you hope the offensive line comes together a little here. Otherwise, I don't know. What's your grade on this offseason, Drew?
I give it a C minus. C minus largely because like it would have gotten a D if they didn't like find a way to just at least kind of get the Trevor Lawrence deal done.
Yeah, that and Armstead, like those are nice. Savage might be nice. They signed a defensive back from Green Bay. Darby could be nice. Devin Duvernay is exciting if you really think the kickoff game is going to be what turns this team around. He's a very good kick returner, punt returner. Mitch Morse is a plus, but you probably took a big step back in the skill position groups.
Yeah, I think so too. And honestly, like most of my kind of just critical eye on this team is a little bit more than just this offseason, but like you made a bunch of mistakes now a couple years in a row and you're paying for it now, right? Like the market resetting contract you gave to Christian Kirk to be a top 40 receiver in the NFL doesn't look great. The draft capital you spent on Etienne, not looking great. The way that you put this offensive line together and the franchise tagging of Cam Robinson not looking great. You didn't seem to lock in. I'm not incorrect, right? Like they haven't locked in long-term Josh Hines-Allen, right? Like he's still playing on a short-term type of deal as far as I remember. And that's not great. And then, the drafting of Trayvon Walker is now looking like a real big problem because this defense with Aiden Hutchinson on the other end and Josh Hines-Allen locked in long term, and you could have spent all your draft capital and all of your, a draft that had really good young tackles. Like if you had used your wide receiver capital in a different way, you could have a much better looking room there. Like there's lots of what feels like in hindsight misallocation in terms of the way that this roster is established. And because of that, you have an aging and questionable offensive line still, in my opinion. You have a skill position group that has holes. You have a defense that has plenty of players that are replacement level at best. And you're spending a lot of money for this without a lot of flexibility in the future to fix this. So your ceiling is relatively capped. And it's not even like, I don't have a ton of love and hope for this coaching staff that they're going to be able to develop young players to the point where, we really are wowed by the contributions they're getting from their second level guys. Like, this feels like a lot of money spent and a lot of effort wasted around the young, the portion of Trevor Lawrence's career where he was relatively young and inexpensive, and now he is starting the next phase where he's going to have to elevate the performance of all these guys. And I don't know that there's many people that would say with high confidence that they think he will be able to do that over the duration of this deal, despite the fact that what else were you going to do?
And Joshua Hines-Allen, it's going to take a little time. It does help with the confusion with the quarterback, I guess. But it's going to be like, God, who is the Stanton? Remember Stanton?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like the Giancarlo thing. It's like, that's going to take some time. But he did get an extension after they tagged him, so he's paid. It's probably the right move. He's very
Josh
good.
Hines-Allen is sticking around.
Josh Hines-Allen.
Okay. All right.
He did get extended for 4 or 5 years. And I know we're delving a little into the future, and a big part of what we're trying to do here is determine how we rate this team for this year. But I mean, you're not wrong, and it's going to bleed over. And at the same time, everything Drew is saying, while it's sort of future facing and problems that are going to continue to have for this team for 2-3 years, it's also a very big problem this year, because this is what it's not like, you leveraged today for tomorrow. No, you seem to just have put together a bad roster. And like you said, the word you use, misallocated, like that feels very apt for this, because I don't know that it's a team ascending at all. when it should be, because again, you're still on a, the decent part of the Trevor Lawrence contract, and now he's paid, and now you're committed, and we move on, I guess.
Okay, so here's the thought exercise for you. Ready?
Yes.
The highest in the draft that the Jaguars pick in the next 5 years is what?
Oh God, like
12th, 15th.
I was gonna say
maybe 11th, 8th. You think 8th?
I think so they could have. I think they could have like a. Hey,
is that a year where their $55 million quarterback gets hurt in week 3 or what?
Well, I think it's a year where he's like banged up and they just shut his ass down because they're like 4-10 and say like, hey, he's ailing. Throw Mac in there. Let's get one good pick.
Okay.
But I mean, if that doesn't happen, no, they're in purgatory. I mean, if that's the point you're trying to make, you're absolutely correct. They're sitting between 12 and 16 an awful lot.
Oh, awful lot. That's right. And a good year, they make a wild card. A bad year, they're picking 14th. like the range of outcomes all of a sudden feels real narrow for these guys for years to come. And I think that's not a good thing in terms of being able to backfill some of these holes and really address some of the areas where you would really like to now put young talent around to build this core. Because like this is sort of like where the Cowboys found themselves after they had to pay Dak, and like they had the 1 year where they got to draft in the 11s range and they take Micah Parsons. They got a difference maker, right? And they got CeeDee Lamb, right? Like that's kind of where the Jaguars are now, where they're just going to have to get lucky with a right wide receiver, the right pass rusher, the right offensive tackle, who's, kind of a guy they can give a second contract to and expect week in, week out contributions from right out of the gate if they're going to make any kind of step forward beyond just being, wild card contention. Because I got to tell you, nothing that we've seen from Trevor Lawrence to this point in his career suggests he's going to be able to go toe to toe on his own and elevate the play of the players around him beyond the likes of the Josh Allens, certainly beyond the likes of the Pat Mahomes, and maybe even not beyond the likes of the Joe Burrows of the world. So you've kind of locked yourself in pretty like forever with a fourth tier guy in your conference, and you're going to have to get lucky in order to be able to have a year or two where you're like a top 2 seed, I think.
Yeah, getting lucky isn't a plan unless you're a 22-year-old out at last call at the bar. It's not great. Yeah, you just like a
22-year-old or like a former Ohio State head coach who's just played a Thursday night football game in Columbus, Ohio, or near Columbus, Ohio, I guess. Anyway,
where do you want to start?
Are we being too hard on their? Am I being too hard on their offseason? Like, do you think that this is a quasi-complete team?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I mean, like the ceiling for this team feels low.
Okay.
It feels like a lot of things could go right, and we could become a team that is competitive in the middle of the.
I guess we should just go right to quarterback then. Are we being too hard on Trevor Lawrence? There is a very, very good Substack written by Kevin Cole, who is a former guest of the Deep Dive, who I have a ton of respect for as just a general kind of just a smart football mind, I guess, is maybe the cleanest way to put it. And his Substack, I believe, is called Unexpected Points. And he does one of my favorite things that can be done in the public space for football, which is try to adjust a useful metric and make it even more useful. And he does it through the lens of luck and in those context of quarterback EPA per play. And his general conclusion over the last 2 years is that Trevor Lawrence has been really fucking unlucky, like crazy unlucky. And I thought that myself a lot of last year as I watched a lot of Jaguars games, hoping that they were going to find a way to do something awesome, and they didn't. And I saw games like week 1 in particular, where they ended up getting a win, but it was ugly against the Colts. And you have plays where not an obvious fumble happens, bounces off Tank Bigsby's hands. It's sitting at his feet. He could easily pick it up and maybe even scramble around for 10, 15 yards. Who the hell knows? But he just sits there and, with his dick in his hand, and a Colts player picks it up and runs it for a touchdown.
Yeah.
And this counts now in the EPA category as a fumble on Trevor Lawrence that ultimately has one of the most significant negative EPA per plays of any play that happened all season last year, Andy. And it felt a little fluky, right? And there were a couple of these. There were a lot of drops. Like Calvin Ridley, my goodness gracious, that man can get behind the defense, and then he can let you down when it's time to catch the ball. There, in fact, I think if he catches a pass from Lawrence in Week 18 against the Titans, they win that game and they're going to the playoffs. And maybe the entire,
can I pause you here for a sec?
Yeah, sure.
Because I've thought about this too, and I feel like we even discussed this last year. Is that fairly or unfairly, EPA per play, when it's used just as a quarterback metric, is awful hard on him, because the big negative swings, like you're saying, are sometimes, the same interception thrown in just, different conditions that might be out of his control at times, or just a funny bounce can be so penal.
Sure.
Whereas, and it's like, is that fair against him? Whereas like every really positive play for a quarterback where it's on the other side of the spectrum feels like, fuck, he made a good play there. Like that was a big pass. Those should count for him. Right. It does feel like the context needs to be applied unevenly, which doesn't feel right just from the sense of using that kind of stat. But like when you look at it from a common sense standpoint, it does kind of click. Yeah. So I'm with you there. And it does make sense, especially for plays like that. And that's where EPA per play is tough. Like we talked about with the injuries and what Trevor Lawrence went through, not only injuries to him, but to his offensive line and wide receiver room, and how his offensive line played and what we got out of just a general game plan for the most part. Mm-hmm. It was really hard to use like straight metrics for his 23 season. I used some blended from years past, and it still was, I don't think I'm getting a great picture. I kind of had to go more vibes from Mr.
Yeah. But like here's kind of the reason that this matters, and just in general, like why, I will, again, like if you really, really want to fight over the luck factor and say Trevor Lawrence is on the same level as Joe Burrow, fine, do it. I don't care. Whatever you want, fine. But like I'm not seeing him being able to consistently elevate the team to take on the true best quarterbacks in the AFC. And this is still this is still kind of in the context of he had some amazing games last year, right? He had some great performances. I spent a good amount of time today kind of breaking down quarterbacks week by week and just kind of binning, kind of resorting and binning, like, how was your performance in that game? So we can come up with a distribution for a given quarterback, because I was getting stuck in the idea of like, well, shit, man, I got all these guys as fives, but not all fives are created equal. Not just because some have distributions where you could change them more aggressively, but some of them have broader distributions where in a given week they could give you an 8 or they could give you a 3, And I think kind of knowing that and being able to capture that quantitatively is useful. And so I kind of just wanted to look at week by week, how was your distribution? And so I'm bidding them basically as you were awesome, you were fine, you were meh, which is a little worse, a little worse than an average, or you had a terrible day, right? But as you would expect, most of this stuff tends to break normal distribution, where 10 of your 16 games, or 11 of your 17 games kind of fall around meh or good. And then you have 3 outliers, amazing, and 3, stinkers. Like that's pretty common across almost all the quarterbacks as you look at them. Trevor Lawrence is not like that, though. He does have some games where he was just flat out awesome. And by the way, they didn't win all of these games, and so it's kind of interesting. But he had 5 games last year where he was great. He had 5 games where he was fine. He had 2 games where he was meh. And he had 4 games where he was bad. And one of the games where he was bad, I'm penalizing him specifically for the fumble, for the pick week 1 against Indy, where they won anyway. And so it's a really confusing mix, because there were games they won anyway that where he was bad. But the problem was like the cluster of games where he performed poorly: Cleveland, Baltimore, KC, San Francisco. Like these are specifically the type of teams where you need him to be very good that day, and he couldn't be, right? And I don't know if that is necessarily a thing on him where he goes up against league competition and specifically doesn't perform well, or if it's related to the injuries or related to the supporting cast, related to the defensive coordinators. It could be a combination of all of this, but he was great against terrible defenses and middling defenses, and good against middling defenses. And he tended to not be able to perform against the best of the best. Do you have a general thought on if there is signal there, or if this is just a random sample problem, small sample size problem?
I think it's a small sample size problem, but not only just because it's a small sample. I think just the turbulence between the last 3 years, and this is something I'm going to get into when I give you my quarterback OC rating, is we had, how many times did they flip back and forth between Press is calling it, Press and Doug are calling the offense. Doug's taking the offense back. Press is getting the offense back. Yeah. We have that. Man. Yeah. So we've had a really inconsistent approach to the game plan, to the game scheme, to the play calling. We've had a bad offensive line. We've had very underperforming and probably underutilized, acquired skill position players. So it hasn't been in the best situation ever. So that's why it's so hard to say. Like, I think it's an incomplete on whether it's a signal or not. Like,
that's a problem for a $55 million quarterback.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, now he's getting paid, and that kind of leads us right back circularly to where we started. We don't think they had the offseason to get the most out of him anyway. So we're probably going to be sitting here next summer and be like, well, I don't know if he's good.
I mean, probably won national championship, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, he's not a choker. He's not like, I can't play in the big games.
He throws a nice ball. It doesn't make bad decisions. He handles pressure well. He has good scrambling. He has good instincts. Like, you watch him play and you're like, that guy's a player. Like, he does some things that generally like are bona fide. And I guess I can't really put my finger on like if the fact that he does not consistently perform as well against elite competition is something or not, but it's something. It's in the data. It's staring right at me. So this is a long way to go around to say that I could only get to a 7 for him for QBOC. And part of my punishing them is OC, and part of my questioning them is like, I want to reflect you as good, not great.
I was 6.
6. Okay. Wow.
And I had a 6.5, and I downgraded it due to the fact that they are still kind of deciding who's going to call plays this year. Apparently,
that's bad.
That's not good. It's not good. It makes me just think we don't have a strong plan. We don't have we should be working on game plans in the off season.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're working together on it, but I hate that. I hate his performances against good defenses and good teams. And it's lower than I thought I'd want to be, but I started low here because you just haven't seen it.
Okay. Whew. Man. Oh, geez. What is your skill group?
What's that?
What's your skill group?
Skill group. All right. We're at a 4.
Oh man.
This is a big range.
Man.
And a lot of this is going to depend on the players
your
around
rating
them.
for the Jags is going to suck.
My rating for the Jags is lower than I ever thought it would start with. But the more I looked into this, it's like, he didn't really do a lot to accept. Like the Calvin Ridley thing, whatever, it didn't work out. But he got worse. He probably got worse. And like I said, I'm giving ETN a better ranking and rating than probably he deserves, because I really believe, just looking at the metrics for the run blocking, he played behind a bad line. But at the same time, I'm not so sure that's going to improve. So I'm wondering if I should be giving him any sort of upgrade. He's average. ETN is average. Tight end, Evan Ingram, average 2, slightly above average, which takes you to the wide receiver. So let's just say we're at a 50th percentile at this point. And then you get to the wide receiver room, which should be the heaviest weight of the 3 positions that aren't quarterback, offensive line on the offense. And I don't know how I can call that average to above average. Like the only way that and it has room to grow because I really like Brian Thomas. I think he has a good shot at Rookie of the Year based on just he's probably going to get the opportunity. He's got the build. He's got speed. Like I'm kind of down with him, but like they were good. They were good in the deep game, and now they probably got worse. Like it's a rough. Kirk is what your number one. Gabe Davis. So you have more of that, more of the same there, and then Brian Thomas Jr. is a rookie. Your depth is Tim Jones. That's the other part of it. Like the depth really does suck after the first three. So it's a below average wide receiver group.
Okay.
I don't know. Like Brian Thomas having a season where he's in the discussion for Rookie of the Year has to happen for this offensive group to be good, I think. Because like you said, Kirk, otherwise you just have a bunch of wide receiver twos. If that.
I think the ceiling in terms of expectation for Thomas is what the Vikings got out of Addison last year, probably. Right? I mean, it's the best you can hope for.
Yeah.
Which isn't rookie year still.
So you see, Gabe Davis, nice deep threat. Brian Thomas, tons of potential, but still a rookie. And that's and then
Christian Kirk.
and then Christian Kirk. So it's,
I think he's there. I think Christian Kirk is their most important player besides Lawrence, probably on offense.
And as AJ Donaldson's pointing out too,
target touch share for Etienne is huge. Like, and
Evan Ingram and Etienne
are
going to play into this receiving game. Etienne is going to play into the receiving game. He's a strong enough receiver, and as Donaldson's pointing out, Evan Ingram could have some big games. He's still got that in his bag.
Yeah.
But now I'm starting low.
I'm at a 5. And I agree with you. Like Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas is what's that, X and A or whatever. Not really moving the needle for me. But Kirk in the slot is good. He's important. He does have some just general chemistry with Trevor. Ingram apparently has chemistry with Trevor in the receiving game. All these doesn't do everything you want out of a tight end, and Etienne certainly as a receiver is useful. I guess my numbers that I was scratching my head about is like, why was there so much Tank Bigsby last year? Like, why was there so much, kind of utilization of guys down the depth chart who didn't necessarily deserve the looks? But whatever the case is, I'm expecting a more concentrated target share around guys that are at least average, and then you put a slightly better than average slot receiver in there and receiving threat and tight end and running back, and I'm fine going 5. I thought about 5.5. I ended up at 5. So you are
and then Tank
Bigsby
probably Tank Bigsby probably has some potential as well. Seen flashes, but again, you're playing behind a pretty bad run blocking unit.
Okay. O-line. Break this one
3.5.
Okay. No strong disagreement there. I was at 3. New center.
Higher for once. That is an upgrade. So
should it? It should be, right?
Fortner wasn't good. Go look at any way that you want to rate it, or any sort of stats, pressure, run block, anything. Mitch Morse is an upgrade. So Mitch Morse coming in from Buffalo, you have a better center, which could help things. And this is where, again, there's room to grow in all these ratings, because I'm starting on the low end for most of these based on what we saw last year and what we added. But for the most part, not super excited about this unit as well. I think most people would agree on that. Let me find my Jags notes here quick. Because I feel like I had a bunch for the offensive line here. So Cam Robinson, like we said, your left tackle missed time with injury and suspension. He's good enough. Like, that'll work. Left guard was mid-season trade or signed. I don't remember how they got a hold of Ezra Cleveland from the Vikings, but he was coming off like a foot injury. He came in mid-season. There was a lot of flux on the line at times, so he might just need more time with the team and not coming off an injury, and he might have a better rating. Being next to a good center probably helps him. So the left side of this line could be okay.
Okay.
Scherf, good pass pro. Again, nobody on this team, nobody excelled at run blocking.
32 though.
Yeah. There's some age. And then Anton Harrison, very young, below average, not good at pass pro, not good at run, didn't have him rated well for anything. This is a spot where
he was,
if
you
he,
know what, Andy? Yeah,
if he,
availability.
he was there.
He was there.
He's like 22. He better play, but he's another one too. If he doesn't take some big step, they've got depth pieces that are just as good as that they might want to try out. Like Walker Little, who played, I think he played some guard, or right guard, left guard.
He wasn't great.
But he might be stepping into right tackle if Harrison doesn't take a step forward. So
Shatley.
Yeah.
The
other,
Foster.
like I said, Fortner, Luke, he can play a couple positions, but he's depth. Depth isn't terrible. I mean, I'm shitting on these guys, but if you compare them to like second stringers across the league, you could do worse as far as guys who've at least had some.
Are you more worried
reps.
about them being effective in pass pro or run blocking?
Run blocking. I think there were some guys that did some nice things in pass pro. I think they're going to improve at that. It just sucks that they didn't improve the wide receiver room to go along with that. That's where the disconnect is. Like, oh, pass pro could get better, but we probably have worse wide receivers. So I'd like to see more run blocking, better scheme. But at the same time, like I mentioned, we've got turmoil at offensive coordinator / who's putting together the plan. So I'm not super hopeful for any of this to happen. I'm talking about the high end of all these things, but not holding my breath.
Oh boy. So you're at 49th percentile for the offense. I'm at the 55th. I'm fine with being a little bit better than average though, because like I do think they're going to be able to put some pressure on bad defenses. Just because of
just looking like if I bring my O line up to 4.5 and skill position to 5, it's an above average offense.
Yeah, like 2022. This was what ranked offense in EPA per play, you think?
Like 12th?
12th. It was 8th. What do you think about this skill group versus that skill group? This is like at least as good, maybe a little better, right? They didn't have Ridley then. They didn't have anyone, I guess, other than let me pull up their 2022 October depth chart here. They had Marvin Jones Jr., they had Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, James Robinson, and Etienne. Etienne was hurt. Yeah. James Robinson, and then Evan Ingram came in midseason. So actually Etienne was playing, so he was hurt maybe the year before. Whatever the case was, it was about as good, maybe not quite as good as they are now, and they ended up at 8th.
That's interesting. I'd like to see like what elevated that team if they were getting more out of the offensive line.
Drop back success rate was over 50%.
Who's my offensive line that year?
Let's see. The top rated O linemen that year on the team were Luke Fortner was the center, Brandon Scherf, Jawan Taylor, Cam Robinson, and Tyler Shatley. So a lot of the same names.
I wonder if a lot of that was just Trevor, I guess.
Played
I'm,
better.
I'm underrating somebody. I just haven't solved how
they had a 4th place schedule that year, so maybe some of it was opponent adjustments.
That could be. Yeah, I don't project the schedule to be terribly easy.
Yeah, that's another factor. Okay, what's their run stop grade?
Run stop 4.
Actually, real quick before moving off, let me look at DVOA and see if this is a factor of having an easy opponent schedule. Jacksonville was 10th in offensive DVOA that year. So I don't know. I think that's probably their good case scenario this year. Not their ceiling, but their good is somewhere in the end of the top 10. You're at 4 run stop.
Yeah, real quick before we get that, let's talk DC. Bringing in Ryan Nielsen, Saints guy. He was with the Falcons last year. Helped them out a little with the go look at the Falcons roster and they got something out of that.
Like a little.
So you got something out of that. We're gonna switch back to a 4-3 after using 3-4 for a few different coordinators. They brought a few people back. They kept some linebacker coaches, but they did bring in another guy, Chris Richard, who worked with Ryan Nielsen, the new DC. They were co-DCs at the Saints a few years back. He's been good with pass defense. Like he has been. They give him a lot of credit. At least the people who are writing about these people, they do give him a lot of credit for helping out with secondary units. He spent a decade with the Seattle Seahawks before that, helping some of those secondaries become decent, if you remember those. So him, and then who was it? Matt House, another one who's been at a few different places. He was another one who was at Kentucky. We talked about another coach who was with Kentucky. So he was Josh Allen's coach when he was SEC Defensive Player of the Year and the Bronco Nagurski Award winner. Bunch of different guys, don't know a ton about him. But they are doing a little bit of a switch. There's some people who think that'll help. There's other people who don't think that's going to make much of a difference. I don't know. It's probably going to depend on the additions they made up front and the additions plus subtractions in the secondary, because they did some flip-flopping. They lost some players in the secondary, lost a corner, you lost a safety, lost another kind of a nickel corner, but you brought in some other guys, like I mentioned, Savage, brought in Ronald Darby, brought in Armstead. A lot of flux. It made it really hard to kind of decide what we're doing here. Savage, like I said, Savage, the safety.
Mm-hmm.
Darnell? Well, I can't think of his first name. Darnell came from
Darnell
Green Bay.
Savage, yeah.
He should be fine helping out as if he's up in the box. It just most of the strength I have in this team is probably pass rush. That's what we saw. And we didn't see a big difference in who we have at the first two levels and kind of the skill level at the third level for run stop. So I'm at a 4.
Yeah, I'm at a 4.5, and I'm expecting basically what we saw last year, which was slightly below average. And in general, like they were below average, but it was like a wide distribution. Some games they just no-showed on run stop, and some games they were great. So I really don't know what the hell's going on. I blame a lot of it on Devin Lloyd, who has had one of the weirdest careers so far in terms of highs and lows for like a third-year pro. Like some years it's been like
I have him as like
some weeks it's like he's unplayable, guys. And some weeks it's like, yeah, this guy is everywhere. He's 19 tackles. What the fuck? Like, he is at both ends of the spectrum. So who the hell knows? But
I have him as pretty bad in coverage.
Okay.
I don't have anybody really great in coverage, in the second level or anyone in the front. And, obviously you weight those a little lighter, but still.
Okay. So where are you for pass rush?
Pass rush. I have too many tabs here. Where are we at? Pass rush, 5.5.
We are in agreement. I'm also at a 5.5.
Good players. And I guess what you get out of Trayvon Walker, who you got the counting stats, you just didn't get the good grades. What you get out of him probably makes a big difference. Obviously, Josh Hines Allen is a top guy, but you need an entire unit for everything to work out. What you get out of Eric Armstead probably matters more than what you get out of Trayvon Walker. He's really versatile. They could line him up at a bunch of different places up front, and it depends what we see from a scheme. We're getting a whole new, like I said, overhaul of defensive coordinators, defensive coaches. It'll be interesting to see how they use those three guys in particular up front. It's definitely above average with a high ceiling, I think. We could see like, shit, this pass rush is playing well. And part of that is probably Savage and Darby are working out, and the secondary is helping the pass rush be good.
That makes sense to me. Okay. We are in lockstep. I'm 5.5 as well. Coverage is a little where it gets a little sketch.
3.5.
3.5. Okay. Well, I'm at 4. I was back and forth there. Rounding got me to 4. What is the strength of this unit in terms of coverage? Man to man?
We're not even super sure who's going to start. So this was a tough one to begin with, because basically Tyson Campbell's playing, and you got decent enough safeties, I suppose, but there's a little disagreement on how this is even going to look back there. So Cisco and Savage, above average safeties. Okay. And then I get, where am I looking at here?
Was Savage going to play Nickelback?
Again, it depends.
Right now, they're calling for Antonio Johnson on the field.
Yeah. So you got three different safeties. It's going to depend if it's going to be Cisco Johnson or Cisco Savage. And if Savage doesn't play nickel, if he's not your third corner, then who's that third corner? Who's the guy that's not Campbell? Because so you put Campbell in Penn, and then you got Ronald Darby. You got a rookie. Is he just going to be rotating in? Is he going to be Jerry and Jones? Is he going to be a rotational piece? Darby has been in kind of an injury concern, and like I said, you're not getting a lot of help and coverage from the linebacker unit. So I don't know. I think we penciled in Campbell and Darby as your outside guys, and then you got Monteric Brown, which I have a very low grade on, and then like I said, Savage. I put Savage and Cisco in at safeties, slightly above average. So it's really questionable on the outside because Campbell is Campbell's one of your better guys. And the grades don't really flesh that out. Like I don't have anybody in the coverage unit is very well graded. So as a whole, not great, not getting much help from the first and second unit. So, and like I said, if it's not good, it hurts the pass rush as well and just drags everything down.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I feel like 3.5 is a little harsh, but it is what it is. You're at
I don't know where do you have
percentile. I'm at the 47th.
Who's your highest rated for just outside coverage?
Campbell, but it's he's bold.
So I have Darby rated ahead of him.
Do you?
He's coming into a new system.
Okay, I think Campbell's fine. I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing there, but there is a little bit of a disconnect with how generally their defense graded last year, particularly their pass defense, and like how you feel about some of the players, how you look at some of the PFF grades, how you look at some of the AVs. Like it's a little confusing. One of the things that hurts Tyson Campbell's one of the things that hurts Tyson Campbell's grade from last year is he only started 11 games, so he had some availability issues. I don't remember what his injury was. Do you?
Soft. It was soft.
It was soft tissue.
I want to say ankle. When we misdiagnosed Trevor too, Trevor was a high ankle sprain, not knee. I just remember him going in for an MRI.
The high ankle sprain was different. The knee was before the Saints game. Somebody was basically saying he's going to.
Was it knee, ankle, shoulder, and finger?
Yeah,
it's a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bump this up a little, perhaps, and some of that being maybe on the back of the fact that they did have depth too through the draft. They picked a couple of secondary pieces, Jerry and Jones and DeAndre Prince. So they outside of Brian Thomas, they went pretty heavy on the defensive side of the ball. They did take one offensive lineman in the draft as well. So maybe I'm willing to give this up to a 4. In fact, I'm going to do it.
You're going to go 4? Okay. 4.
Yeah,
4 for coverage.
You've
All right,
convinced me.
You're at the 45th percentile. I'm at 47th for defense. What is their special teams number, Andy?
It is a 7.
Oh, look at them.
We're going to give them a good special teams number.
Okay.
Even with a kicker competition, it appears, because they did draft, not even the first. They drafted, I think, the 3rd kicker off the board. Cam Little, Arkansas, I believe. Stanford, excuse me. I don't know. The kicking is a competition, but they have a pretty good punter in Logan Cook. And like I mentioned, Devin Duvernay is probably
slick.
Yeah, that's a big plus to have him returning kicks and punts, especially if it's not a guy that you need to be using on offense. Like a lot of teams are forced to have a running back that they're using quite a bit, go back there and return punts, or obviously often a wide receiver as well.
Yeah.
The fact that he's probably, he's definitely second fiddle in the depth charts there. That's kind of nice as well.
Okay. What's your intangibles number?
Oh, intangibles coaching. 5. I think I have love for Doug, but I also have some doubt based on the decision making. So I just put it in the middle of the league. I've seen really good things out of Doug, obviously. We've seen him take a team to the top, baby. We've seen him make some just asshole calls between, the offensive coordinator, the play calling stuff from the last few years really stuck in my craw, as you can probably gather as many times I brought it up. don't love that
How'd you
sort of
really
stuff.
feel about it?
Yeah, I don't love that stuff, and I hate it even more when it comes to light, when it's out in the public, when it's out in the media, and it's getting talked about a bunch. It makes it even worse for me. So I'm at a solid 5. I respect Doug too much to take much away from him, but I haven't been impressed with much we've seen from this team from a leadership standpoint down the stretch over the last couple of years.
Yep, that makes sense to me. This is probably one of those where it's been sort of just a general steady decline, right?
Yeah, where would you have put Doug 2 years ago? It's like a 7, right?
7, 88. I would have said he's one of the with the kind of the brightest minds in terms of taking advantage of in-game decision making and being on the cutting edge of sequencing and blah blah blah. It all feels like it's dried on the vine for him. I'm at a 4 for intangibles now.
Oh man, I thought I was being the asshole to Doug. Woof.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like it does. Like he feels a little like you have a flop like that last year when it goes that tits up and the expectations were that high. I worry a little bit about him losing the locker room here, and like I never really understood how or why he got fired from Philly, right? Or did he leave Philly?
That was kind of a headbanging with the front office.
But like still, like if they thought that the locker room loved him, then they get over the headbanging. Right? Like if they're like, this guy's got perfect command of our entire, all our most talented players are playing hard for this guy, then you find a way to make it to mend fences. So I'm a little nervous about just in general.
Being out mending fences.
So anyway,
right,
I'm
4,
at the 53rd percentile for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You're at 49th. Well, I got you at 46.
Oh, no.
Well, I'm sorry. I did not put your intangible number.
48.5 is where I have them at.
49th. Okay. I got your intangible number in there now. Sorry.
So I have them as a -1.
You're at a -1. I'm at a +2. Interesting. So my Jaguars are lane 3 to your Jaguars in London, Andy.
Yeah, I guess I think a big part of my decision, and again, when I'm doing these, I'm making notes on like, what's going to change my mind in these first 3 weeks? What's going to be the catalyst for me to greatly change some of these numbers? And boy, like 80% of it's on one side of the ball.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because I don't see anything in this defense.
Dude, if you upgrade Lawrence and OC from 6 to 7, you're at 52 percentile.
Yeah.
So that's like right there that you're now a +1 from a -1. Like that's a nice little bump.
Willing to swing this team pretty hard if we see the offense show early signs of life.
Yeah. There's some problems though, and let's see where the early signs of life are coming up against in terms of opponents. We got some tests in the first quarter.
Cleveland could be a good team. Cleveland is a playoff team with a good coach, maybe a quarterback who's gonna finally fit in up there, despite his,
I'm not entertaining that.
I'm entertaining
enough. Their defense could definitely throttle Trevor.
I'm entertaining enough of a probability against this defense. So 0-4, 0-5 is on the table.
Not crazy. It's not crazy.
0-5 is on the table if Indianapolis is, a plus.
Yeah. Bad rest disadvantage at Buffalo. You got to avoid going at Buffalo last year, not this year. This year it's on Monday Night Football, and you are at a rest disadvantage. They're coming off Thursday Night Football. So they got 2 extra days off, 2 or 3.
0-5 flying to London, bummer. That could be a super big bummer.
Yeah.
What a bad spot for the Bears.
We're gonna leave Peterson. We're gonna leave Peterson on the tarmac if the Jags can't beat the Pats.
Feels like they have to beat the shit out of both. No matter what happens, even if they're 2-3,
they gotta win those 2 games.
They have to beat the shit out of those 2 teams.
Yeah. What do you think realistically they are through 7 weeks here? Because like 6-1 feels completely impossible. 5-2 feels pretty unlikely.
3-5 leaving that Green Bay game.
Okay. Okay. So if you have any spirit or interest or belief in the Jags, there's no emergency.
Yeah, tough games, revenge game for Doug at Philly. Tough game, tough sandwich spot there with Minnesota, who's not, not a dead team despite the issues they have at the quarterback room. But you got Philly and Detroit on the road on the opposite side of a Minnesota game, and then you're by, and then it's not so bad. Although Houston, the Jets.
Yeah, very realistic chance you're dogs to Houston by that point in the season.
I would think.
Week
Probably.
13, I don't think you're laying points against Houston. If Houston does what they're supposed to do and you go struggle through the toughest part of your schedule.
And as Donaldson's pointing out, they get, it is hot, humid down there. You're not getting like a couple of early games. I guess you get Indy, but that's already in October.
Okay, let's think about
an early home game.
Let's think about the way we've rated these guys. We've given them questionable marks in coverage, but good pass rush. We've given them difficult. We expect they're going to have difficulty run blocking, which in general just means putting away a game is going to be tricky, right? Putting away a lead is going to be tough, even though you have a good pass rush. If your coverage is weak and you can't run the ball, then you're going to be in a dogfight. Nothing is going to come easy to them with this schedule, which looks absolutely. This looks like a nightmare, right?
It's not great.
You got one game where you're favored by 6, one game where you're favored by 4. Everything else, you're inside of a field goal or dogs, and handful of games where you're expected to almost surely lose. That's not great, man. 5 likely losses, 2 likely wins, and everything else coin flip. I think this is a trouble. This smells like trouble. And hopefully, I guess my thought is stay away from these guys in the futures pool. If anything, take an alt under win total on them, and then hope that the market loses a little bit of eye off the ball in terms of how good they could be, and you can scoop them in spots like Sunday Night Football at Philly. That game is not going to have much appeal, by the way, if it's like 2-6 Jaguars at Philly in prime time.
And it's funny too. The way we do these is based on the market's ratings for these two teams. We do the 2 worst teams on Monday, the 2 best teams on Wednesday. The way I have it, we would have done the Jags on Monday and the Colts today.
Yeah, I think so too.
I have what?
Okay,
5% difference there.
Low expectations. Yeah, this is maybe a bet on team late.
I might look at that alt win total under, or with Tennessee being a team I kind of liked, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah,
Jags to finish last in the division. That's maybe that's more fun than we talked a big game about fading Houston on the Monday, and then I finished some more Houston work last night and this morning, and I'm not as hot on that as I thought.
No,
I'm less hot on that.
Pretty good. Although their schedule, dude,
That's the only negative I had, really.
My God. If they do well with that schedule, then like start printing some AFC Championship game tickets.
Any last thoughts on the Jags before we move on? Yeah, betting wise, I can't get on them for anything positive.
I guess in those primetime games, betting against them with the lead at halftime seems in order, right?
Yeah, if they do have the lead, like we said, if the run game continues to be a struggle, if they're struggling to have a high success rate with runs, if they're struggling with anything successful teams do with the lead, and they're definitely a bet against team, especially if some of these secondary piece moves don't work out. Pass rush is just on the field the whole time. We don't have a ton of depth outside of your top 3. Those guys are gassed late. The secondary is not clicking yet, and boom, you lost a 10-point lead.
Yeah, and I think the other side of the coin is I'm fine with betting on them to come back. Fine, yeah. If the offensive line only has to worry about pass pro and they can utilize all the weapons in all the field in the passing game in comeback mode, I think they'll score. I think in general, their run stop is good enough to get them in 3rd and long, and then their pass rush is good enough to get them off the field. to give more opportunities to comeback drives. So it's a team I'll bet on to come back without really having much hesitation, and I'll be betting against them to hold on to decent sized leads. So
for sure.
Let's hit the music.
Drew, little fun fact. I couldn't find the outro. I couldn't
Really?
find the music, so I don't know if I love the outro. I found the music for it. We're just going to remain on the screen for it. This is how the outro is going to go now. This is the end of the Jaguars podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, we're going to continue on right after this. But I still the outro. When I did this earlier, I had it looped, and it just kept playing. I'm like, oh shit, I think he's doing it again. But no, this is au revoir. I'm gonna write down 1 hour.
10042. We almost hit it on the number. Came close.
Second verse, same as the first.
Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Interesting AFC South team number 4. The Houston Texans take on all comers this year. Expectations sky high. I mean, stop me if you've heard this before. Rookie quarterback performs very well, wins a playoff game, and now all of a sudden, fans, media, everybody expecting him to be an MVP contender, a AFC championship likelihood. This has gone from, can the Texans improve upon a 2-win season? Hopefully, yes, probably. Oh, look, they did well. Oh, well, look, they're doing very well. Oh, look, they won the division. They won a playoff game. Now they're for real, and they are, in the kind of conversation with the elite teams in the AFC. And I just generally have seen enough of these and have just enough kind of scars and mental baggage that my initial kind of take when there is one of these sort of team overachieves, team makes a bunch of splashy moves, team has a quarterback that only has 17, 18 games, 19, I guess he has 19 games experience, is believed that he's going to be able to go toe to toe with the Mahomes of the world. And that is typically where I say, not so fast. And I think the general sentiment in the market is a little hot on these teams, despite the fact that it is very hard to go unit by unit, offense and defense, coaching, and really poke holes. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, the biggest hole to poke is just like, is anything ever sticky? Is the chess match we always refer to between the teams in the offseason, like, hey, here's a divisional opponent we have to beat or a conference opponent we have to play. Like, this is how we beat them. And then if enough teams figure that out and make it work, suddenly that highly touted team is just a middle of the pack squad, despite a very talented roster. This one was another tough one because, like you said, it's hard to justify a downgrade other than, just like saying regression without actually putting anything behind it. They added a very good wide receiver. They probably stayed neutral or better everywhere else. The defense is very hard to sort out because they basically made like one of those, if you're in fantasy where somebody makes like a 6-for-6 trade, like just trade away half your team because there is a ton of turnover on the defensive side of the ball. But some of the guys they replaced or some of the guys they used to replace the guys they lost are pretty good players as well. So I don't know if I can go say like a lot of that is negative. It might be positive in the long run. It's just really hard to get a grip on. So I I know we do these, these ratings, and I'm not through all the other teams. I have some rough ratings, just placeholders in for everybody because it helps get the numbers tighten up a little bit. Even I put in a little ranking column that just does a quick rank, and I started to add up numbers and I started to improve my Houston numbers, and it just kept going up into the single digits as far as where I rank this team amongst the other teams so far as a whole. It's like, Jesus, I have to bet on this team, and I don't know. Like, we're gonna have to sit here and poke holes because everything's so positive.
I think the real answer is just that it's still a young team, and there's going to be learning curve. There's going to be attrition, over the balance of the early portion of the season. But just standing stubbornly and saying because they're coming in overrated, they're a hot sell, I think is I've kind of cooled my jets there. And I want to kind of put a little bit of their 2023 success into context in a couple of ways, because there's good and bad context for them in 2023, in my opinion. The good context is they did what they did in a division that was a lot more competitive than people thought, in a conference that we knew was going to be freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And they did it in a year where their offensive line was hurt every single week. And what they were doing scheme-wise, particularly in the passing game, was resilient to the fact that they had miserable injury luck on the offensive line. And if you look at specifically what Slowick, the way he kind of approached coordinating the offense for the Texans, he had some games that were just masterpieces. And then he had some games where you are just pulling your hair out. Like, you have CJ Stroud on a nuclear heater, motherfucker, throw the goddamn ball.
I know that there was a quote from Stroud where he said he talked to Slowick, like, I think I'm comfortable throwing more. And then they just did. And like you said, it was maddening to see him get away from that at times.
Surely. Sure.
Like, nobody wants to be so one-dimensional.
They wasted – they had no offensive line. They wasted lots of downs running the ball into a cloud of dust. And it didn't really matter.
And still won a playoff game.
They still won. They still won the South. They still won a playoff game. Now, the margin for them winning the South was narrow.
Well, it was a slow start. This was an 0-2 team. This was a 3-3 team. They did need to figure some things out early, but once it clicked hard.
Right, which is to say that, like, a lot of the stuff we're saying, like a healthy year of the offensive line, the running game clicking, like, oh man, you can squint and be like, oh yeah, they kind of are contenders, right?
And yeah, again, let's the devil's advocate stuff that you can do. Be like, man, Nico Collins, like, he was not good before this, and suddenly Nico Collins just breaks out. So let's just say Nico Collins retires from football because he realizes he's never going to be that good. He's gone. You still have Tank Dell coming back, who was great for an injury. You have Stephon Diggs. You have Dalton Schultz. And then we didn't get to, like, your backups are wide receiver 2s or 3s on some other teams. Noah Brown's gotten plenty of run when he was with Dallas. Mechie still hasn't really got a shot yet because so many other young receivers. Skoranek was a contributor for the Rams. You have Xavier Hutchinson as like he's buried down the depth chart. Robert Woods buried down the depth charts. They just signed Quintez Cephas the other day.
I think they cut him also.
They have? Did they already?
I think they already got him. Yeah.
He got signed like yesterday.
I know. I don't know what happened there.
They have so many wide receivers. Like, it just seems impossible for them all to fail. So yeah. Again, like the poking the hole stuff is, well, what if the offensive line sucks? Well, it sucked last year. They still won. What if Joe Mixon sucks? They didn't get that much out of the running game at times. Didn't matter. What if the defense isn't out there? The defense was kind of feast and famine at times. They just had really good pass rush at certain times and got the most I think they were going to get last year out of like Stingley and co, and it was fine. Like, all the things you want to poke holes in, shit already happened, and they still won. So it's probably a team with the top end of the range. It's a top 5 team in the league.
Okay. By the way, I read a tweet that had a mistype because it's been deleted and retweeted, and they did not cut Cephas already. That was
I was going to say that'd be mean if he just flew it down.
Yeah, they put him on the roster and then they immediately cut him to make room for some signing. Anyway, but he is still around. But yeah, no, I mean, like I think the point is fair, which is not only do they have emerging young talent, but they have depth. And regardless of whether you want to kind of use a little bit more of a slow, kind of upgrade for, each player and each unit, versus kind of reacting aggressively to what you saw at the end of the season. You still have to acknowledge that, that it's tough to find reasons to doubt that they're going to be able to repeat at least the success of like making teams work hard for wins, if not just outright surprising the teams that we expect to be good. So I think there is probably no, if I might be forgetting about something. I might be, making a mistake here, but the Texans went from just an atrocity of a franchise with no hope and nothing and no draft picks and, really like nothing going. Yeah. To like the team that you would probably say has the number one young core in the NFL. They had the rookie offensive and defensive rookies of the year last year at premium positions. They have a number of, just in general, young players in the secondary and in the skill position group who you're like high draft pedigree, shown something, like they put it together a full season and all of a sudden this is like a super team. So, I don't think if I was any other front office aside from the Kansas City Chiefs and with Pat Mahomes, I don't think I would entertain the idea of trading my roster for this roster just for what the future holds. Is that fair?
That's fair. Like you said, they beat some good it's funny they lost to Carolina. This is one of the teams that lost to Carolina last year. If you go look at how many wins they had, I always find that was such a weird, ugly game. There was, this was a team that, like you said, it didn't start hot. There were some growing pains early. They lost 3 of their first 5 games, and they missed Stroud down the stretch in at least 1.5. I can't remember how much they actually lost him when he was hurt down the stretch. They had a tough schedule down towards the end with some teams that were vying for playoff spots. They played the Browns when, Flacco was doing his thing, and they still ended up in the playoffs and getting wins. So yeah, it's hard to just discount them based on the holes we're going to try to poke.
Okay. Yeah, they were excellent team in general to back last year for huge stretches of the season after their opening cold start. Realistically should have beat Atlanta and had 4 wins banked through 6 weeks, which would have been an amazing success. The point of the season where you just had to, there were really 2 games where you just had to acknowledge like some specials going on here. The first was the Tampa game where, they win by 2 in just absolutely insane fashion. RIP and peace to anyone that laid 2.5.
Minus 2.5
with the Texans that day as CJ Stroud kneeled out so that there was not a return that could have flipped the outcome there, as they scored with 5 seconds remaining, I believe. But
yeah, I think because your kicker was like Ogunbowale at that time.
Oh, incredible. Was that the issue? The kicker was injured. That's right.
You had the injury to Fairbairn at that point.
Yeah. But, that game happens. You click in almost every way. Your defense is still getting beat, but your offense looks like ungodly good in that game. And then the next week you come out against Big Lou and the Bengals and you hang 30 on them and you do it in impressive fashion. And you win that game by 3, but it felt like a bigger win than that, particularly since you were 5.5 point dogs. That was like the moment that everyone who had any reservations about upgrading the Texans just had to capitulate and do it. And from then on, outside of the Jets game where there were, I think 10 contributing factors to the Texans offense sucking in that game. The being outside, bad weather, elite defense, CJ Stroud not having all his weapons,
a lot of good
CJ Stroud getting hurt.
Here.
Yeah, right. That one was the one that really kind of was very explainable and did not hold against them. And then down the stretch, they were quite good outside of the one stinker against Cleveland. So in the regular season, which they avenged with authority in the postseason. It was This was about as good as you could have ever possibly hoped for. I'm kind of surprised that DeMeco Ryans did not get Coach of the Year, because like this was unexpected. I don't think anyone realistically. I mean, a preseason price for the Texans to win the AFC South had to be what, 25-1.
He didn't beat the Coach of the Year in the regular season, though.
So yeah, I guess that's what
when
you
they
need
vote
to do.
on it. Well, that's
Yeah,
when they
the
vote on
voting
it.
last
If they'd
year.
have voted after the playoffs, I think if they vote after the playoffs, he gets it, right?
Oh yeah, without question. Yeah, no question. We know what the rules are.
Close. I kind of want to. Yeah, I kind of want to go look at the votes. I feel like.
Yeah, I think it came
was
down to
probably
second
pretty
place stuff. It was very, very.
Wasn't
very
this one? This is the one that there was tied.
Oh,
And
you're right.
There was
And
like,
he had more.
remember,
It was
it's like,
more first
oh,
places
guys,
or more second places.
we invented a tiebreaker that no one had read about until tonight.
That
I remember
is
people
correct.
were mad. So obviously did a good job. So him, Slowick, and then can you name their defensive coordinator without looking?
I mean, it's
no, that's what I'm saying. It's not a guy you know because it's Ryan's.
I have no idea.
Matt Burke.
Matt Burke?
Not that Matt Burke.
Oh.
You remember Matt Burke, the Vikings center?
BIRK, center for the Vikings. Yeah.
Yeah, he ran for vice governor in Minnesota here. Lost badly. It's hard to run.
You're kidding.
He ran on the wrong ticket for a liberal state. Like it's tough sometimes. So all their posters were like purple and gold though. Like they really played on the Viking stuff. I think they thought that would help. It was fun.
So the Texans were the fourth choice in the
guy.
AFC South last year, by the way, and they were 11-1 preseason. That had to be the biggest price that came through in the division markets, right? I would guess. Yes.
I did look at this other Matt Burke. His not much on his Wikipedia. Went to Dartmouth, has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and basically been with like 10 different teams.
Okay. They finished last year. The DVOA says basically the 10-7 record was a little bit inflated. Their Pythag was 9.2.
They won the close games.
14th. They won their close games. And also, like, I would also say that there were kind of two factors that I think really helped them early on. One was in their wins, they had some lucky breaks in game that got them into positive game state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really was huge for CJ Stroud, kind of soft landing NFL, where you're like, okay, whoa, yeah, wow, we got 2-score lead. Like, this is great. Like, and by the way, the running game's not working, so we got to keep throwing. And that ended up compounding his success. And,
how many interceptions did he throw last year?
7.
5. That was the thing. That was the thing
5?
that kept sticking. That was the thing. It's
my
like,
goodness.
if you just never, we talk about the big EPA swings. You just never throw the back-breaking pick. You just never do it, and you're going to be fine.
Okay, so he's this generation's iteration of Aaron Rodgers. That's an absurd 8%.
So
and
I know I know he missed some games, but to throw for 4,100 yards with only 5 interceptions is a feat for any quarterback in this league. Throw out Mahomes and some of the elite guys were just expected, but basically, like for 28 other guys, they would love to have 4,000 plus yards and 5 picks. That is my contract's getting better kind of year.
Yeah, he only had two bad games all season. His debut against Balto and the Jets game, which we mentioned, which had external factors. He only had 2 meh games. He had 7 games that were good, fine, and then 4 games where he was elite in the regular season, including the Indianapolis game that got them into the playoffs in Week 18. That was probably the high point, in my opinion, of watching his 2023 tape. I would say a lot of teams, when you have that level of success, when it's a little bit unexpected, go into an off season and they're not necessarily as aggressive as the Texans were. Really, you kind of said it. They went and they did lose some pieces, but they replaced them with equal or better, and most notably made the splash in bringing in a disgruntled Stephon Diggs. Now, talk do you want us to talk about Diggs now, or do you want to save it for the skill position section?
We could probably save it for there. But like I said, you lose some guys, but you gain some guys. Like Mixon, probably getting a little up there, but he's going to be fine. It's not like you're replacing a really good running game that you need to figure out. Diggs, I'll get into it later. I want to get into it a little later, but that's a coup. Danielle Hunter is probably better than what they lost in like Greenard and who else they lose up front. Man, they lost so many defensive players. I mean, it was like 6 starters that went away because you lost Greenard, you lost Denzel Perryman, you lost Malik Collins, you lost Sheldon Rankins, Nelson. But yeah, they bring in Danielle Hunter, one of the prize jewels of the free agency class. He's pushing 30 now, but still very effective. You had multiple positions you need to replace at the second level, and you needed a good linebacker. You got Azeez El-Share. You got people call him Foley because his first name's longer than that, but Fatukasi, I'm not 100% sure how to say middle the front line kind of guy. Danico Autry, that's a good addition. You drafted Lassiter to help you out in the secondary. They probably at worst it's a net neutral.
No,
but I'm almost certain. I'm almost certain
Grenard for Hunter has to be considered a positive.
Grenard, and you'll see
Diggs,
this brought up.
And Diggs for nothing
anywhere.
Has to be considered a positive, right?
Well, no, I'm talking defensively only.
Oh, okay.
For sure it's a positive offseason just because of Diggs. And,
I know. I think Autry and Shazier are good players, and you picked your divisional opponent Tennessee's pocket for those guys.
People pick on Grenard too because I've seen this 3 different places with just his conversion rate. It basically is like how many pressures do you have and how many were sacks, and his was like unsustainably high. Where it's like, hey, this guy had a good year. It's like, yeah, he'll just never have that year ever again. Whereas Danielle Hunter is a high pressure, normal conversion rate kind of guy, and he's very good.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about rating CJ Stroud. Bobby Slowick, by the way, deserves, I would say, 80% credit, 20% criticism for the way that the season went, because 80% of it was amazing and 20% of it made me want to scream and turn off the television. And I think the important part of the takeaway for the Slowick system is like there's been very few people who have come away from the Shanahan tree and have been able to replicate cleanly what it is that's special about the Shanahan system. But Slowick seems to have gotten at least the passing game pretty damn well. And it was maybe the Pittsburgh game for the Texans last year where they had 3 replacement starting linemen. They were down to like literally guys they were signing off the street, or like practice squad players were being elevated to the starting lineup. And they went up against Pittsburgh and held their own. And I was like, you know what? I guess it's not about talent. It's something about Slowick's system that is agnostic to, the pass pro and
Slowick's system and
CJ
Stroud playing with
his makeup. That. Yeah. The combination is just perfect music. And so I think just in general, like you have to kind of look at them it's a combo that's not going to make lots of mistakes. They're not going to be perfect, and there's probably room to grow. And I think you have to start at a 7.5 for these guys. What do you think?
I have to pull. I feel like I'm close. I'm not on that tab because I'm never on this tab. That's exactly what I had. I had a 7.5.
Okay.
Because I didn't, especially when you want to, some of these quarterback ones, you're going a little more off vibes. I didn't think I could have it, as low as like where I had Jacksonville. I had to have it higher than that. So this is the highest rating I've given to a quarterback OC combo yet. Yes, we have bones to pick with Slowick about certain things, but that's the thing about all these guys. We do this with almost every single young player. Why can't we do it with a young coordinator? Like, who's to say Bobby Slowick, because he's good, hit his ceiling? He has the whole offseason to figure out where he fucked up. Like, he could have the Velociraptor opening the door scene where, oh shit, he learned how to put a run game in. Like, this isn't good because they're a balanced offense that's like really good on both, and both the pass and run. Now this sucks to game plan against this guy as a defensive
I'm
coordinator.
not as worried about that.
Yeah, it already does.
I'm not as worried about that with Joe Mixon and Damian Pearson, except for being honest.
Here's the thing: like, I don't think in today's league you need running backs that have these huge eye-popping ratings from PFF or huge, stats, huge counting stats. You just need like 3 guys that stay healthy, that play within your scheme. And Mixon's good enough as a pass catcher. Pierce is good enough as like just throw him at the line as many times as you want. And then you got the kicker backing him up too. Like, you got a good enough running back room to put together a decent scheme. Like, it's not one of those where, because there are still teams that's like, oh, this is a talented, skilled running back. He's elevating this team. Where I see a lot of these teams are just like, hey, you got 2 or 3 guys, and it's just happening because of the scheme. Minnesota was like that for years. That's where I didn't love Dalvin Cook moving on. Obviously, we saw where his career is, but like sometimes it's just a really good outside zone like that. Just makes a running back look pretty damn good.
Okay. Sounds reasonable to me. Skill position group overall for you gets what?
7.5 as well.
Okay.
I mentioned you have a high-end guy in Nico. You have a guy who could be a 1, but doesn't need to be, which is what I love about Diggs. What was our main qualm with the Bills' offense for like 3 years? Like, God, you got to get somebody else out there.
Get another guy.
It's like, oh, you have Gabe Davis, who's just like a deep threat. Oh, we're bringing in this guy. You're bringing in that guy. We got Khalil Shakir. What are we doing here? Like, if he doesn't have to be the end all be all,
Cole Beasley,
and he can just be a high, let's say it's 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. It's just like, he's there. He's always there. Like, because you have other guys, he's not drawing all the coverage, and he's just going to be so reliable and stuff like that when he isn't the main focal point of the defense. Like, Diggs could have a really good year where he isn't putting up 1,800 yards like one of these top JJ Tyreek guys, but it's like, fuck, he's moving this offense. He's a really important part of like crucial downs over and over again. So I think Diggs could have a good year. Like a hot take, Stephon Diggs is a good player, but yeah, Nico Collins, even 80% of last year, again, healthy, Tank Dell healthy, and like I mentioned, Noah Brown, John Mechie III, Ben Skoranek, Xavier Hutchinson, Robert Woods. Like, the depth is sick. Dalton Schultz is above average. Stroud is slightly above average. Probably put him above average. So, yeah.
I'm at 8, and it's because it's not higher, honestly, because I don't like the running back room. Like, honestly, like this is how I would put together an elite set of receivers.
It's a really good roster. Like, yep.
This is it. And I personally think it is a buy low on Diggs as a player, because to me, the issues that he suffered from week 5, 6 on, I believe, looked to me like he had some sort of sports hernia or some sort of abdominal injury that was not being reported. And it was impacting his ability to stay on the field and to create separation. And it definitely affected the trust between Allen and Diggs in terms of target share. And it definitely became crystallized when Diggs dropped that pass against the Chiefs, right? Like, people were literally like, what's happening? Because of the stat count. And then they watch the high leverage games where he doesn't make the play, and they're like, oh, he's washed.
Oh, he's washed. Yeah, I think he was carrying some injury, and then he was carrying too much of the – what else are you going to do? You got him got him at a tight end, whereas like – and Birdie, I don't know. I don't know if I believe this. Diggs is going to be the guy drawing the coverage. Birdie says Diggs will be game planned as the number 1. No way DC's let Diggs beat them. Like, Nico Collins had 1,300 yards in like 15 games. Like, you can do that at your own peril, I guess.
Nico Collins had a game towards the end of the season where you had to come out of that thinking, is this guy a top 10 wide receiver?
Yeah, I think you're just having a bad time putting this game plan together, because we haven't even mentioned like what Tank Dell brought to this team. What some of these other backups can do is you rotate them through, go 4 wide. Like I said, where do you have Schultz as a tight end?
As far as true talent, he's top 7 for me, but I do have a little bit of a ding for him because for some bizarre reason, CJ Stroud and Schultz have never vibed. Like they're never really on the same page. There's a lot of targets that aren't connecting for some reason. Like that's the one thing that I like. If I gave CJ Stroud homework over the summer, it would be literally like figure out how you want to utilize this weapon because he's a weapon, especially with all the talent you have at the wide receiver position. He should be very, very effective. Figure it out, right? Like that's kind of if they are connecting early and often, then that's going to be spooky for sure. Because I thought he was
if suddenly like Dalton Schultz and Joe Mixon, we're like 3 games in and both of those guys have like 10, 12 catches apiece and a touchdown each or 2. It's like, oh no, like because that wasn't even supposed to be the good part. Nico Collins is this guy who put up 140 yards 4 times last year. He can go put up double-digit catches. I think he did that. See, 1, 2, 3 different weeks he put up double-digit targets. Excuse me. Yeah. He had 9 catches on 9 targets in the final week for a 195.
God, he destroyed Denver, which I'm assuming was Pat Surtain. He destroyed Indy, which obviously bodes well for you in division. Nico Collins, that is. Yeah, man. Like, I think it must have been the Indy game, I guess, or maybe it was the Denver game where he came out of there, and you're just like, this guy he's super young. He's on exactly the same page with CJ Stroud. This is going to be, just beautiful music for a long time. I guess he's not super young. He's 25. I didn't realize how long he was in the league. Anyway,
no, that's the thing. Like Collins had a few years where it's like, hey, this is an okay guy, and then last year, it just clicked. It clicked with the right coordinator, right quarterback.
Yeah. Okay. Well, whatever the case is, like, I'm not going to assume that Diggs is going to be a problem from a chemistry standpoint because Stroud is such a
what's
clear
his
and
floor
obvious
and
leader.
Ceiling as far as Diggs floor and ceiling as far as like league ranking, as far as wide receivers, like he's
floor.
They have two ones.
Yeah, floor is probably 20 just because he could suffer from target share.
Yeah,
ceiling is 5. Probably. I don't think anyone's going to, regardless of how amazing he is with Stroud this year, I don't think anyone's coming out saying he is in the same class as the Tyreeks and the J. Jeffs and the CeeDee Lambs. He's like maybe 4. Maybe you would put him after those 3 guys, but probably more likely he hits the 10-ish range. But whatever the case is, people think he's washed. So I don't think so.
And I don't know if he's – and Michael, I don't know if he's going to play slot. I'd have Tank play slot, I guess, and put him and Nico outside because that's fucked if you have to game plan for that. Because, you have 2 –
Or just,
like,
I think
worst case –
move them around.
Worst case, you have 2 top 20 wide receivers. Best case, you have 2 top 10, top 8 wide receivers, which is very fun. So, maybe I'm even I'm lower than you on this with the 7.5.
What's your O-line rating?
Middle of the pack. This is a flat 5.
Ooh.
You have a very, very good player, and then you have 4 other players who also play on that offensive line. And Tunsil isn't young, nor is he held up all that well at times. He had arthroscopic knee surgery after the season. That's supposed to be fine. He's supposed to be 100% ready for camp. Things should be good. He's an all-pro, especially in pass protection. His run support's just okay. But, they did have some injuries here. I've seen this, again, in 2 or 3 different places. They had 7 different linemen played over 400 snaps. Another 3, so that makes 10 total, played at least 200 snaps. Wow. Usually not a recipe for success. And they still, like you said, got it done. Kenyon Green, left guard, missed last year, if I'm right. So they have Kenyon Green and they have Kendrick Green, and this really messed with my notes for a little bit because I kept screwing it up. He wasn't great in 2022, so who knows? Juice Scruggs is a question mark. he's another guy who's had to move around a lot due to injuries. That's where I'm willing to give basically all these guys a little benefit of the doubt because they've had to fill in at other spots. Being back at center where he belongs probably helps him. But again, it's not like I'm not expecting him to be, oh, well, we have a top 10 center. That's just not what his ceiling is. Shaq Mason, right guard, solid, old. He's the best non-Tunsil piece. Obviously.
Yeah, I think you have 2+ players in Tunsil and Shaq, and they're both old, so they get dinged a little bit for me. And then you have 3 question marks that might be bad. And
Titus Howard played guard last season, so he's probably your right tackle. Should be your right tackle. That's his natural position, and he did play well there 2 years ago. He was playing a bunch of guard last year, so he's another one where I don't think Titus Howard ends up as some big plus, but him and Scruggs back at the positions they should be at is probably a lot closer to getting them to league average, which with 2 pluses and 2 league average guys and probably a minus, I'm at a 5 right now still because we did see it. It was just we just didn't see a lot in the run protection or the run blocking.
Run blocking was pretty weak. Yeah.
And some of these guys are not. Like Green at left guard, he might not be there. They have rookie Blake Fisher. He can play right tackle if they want to bump Howard back into guard. So there's a little depth as well. Maybe I'm a titch low because I don't hate the depth.
I'm lower than you. I'm only at 4. Really? And mostly it's mostly just because there's a couple of weak links in my opinion. And I didn't see much ever out of any of these guys in the run block. You can tell, you're going to be good off, I'm assuming you're not going to have issues with pass pro, particularly off the left edge, but maybe. And then I got questions everywhere else. So I'm at a 4. I'm not like expecting them to be bad, but I think league average would surprise me out of that.
It was difficult to rank based off last year's numbers, their ratings, their, any of the stats you want to use for an offensive lineman because so many guys missed time and so many snaps at, not their natural position. So that made it difficult. I gave him a little benefit of the doubt because you have an anchor at left tackle and we've seen that work in San Francisco.
Okay.
Where some of these coaches are from.
Okay. So you are at 69th percentile offense. I am at 68th percentile offense, correct?
I have a 68.8.
Okay. Where are you on run stop?
5.5.
Ooh, I got a 6 for them on run stop. I'm expecting this to be a pretty good run stopping unit.
Defense.
They were good last year. The scheme leans into it, and I think they made some upgrades.
They had a bunch of good.
Core.
Yeah, they had a bunch of good games on paper for like rushing yards per game, yards per carry, success rate stuff. But I think a lot of it was game state, and there was just so much turnover. I dinged them a little.
Do you know why they didn't try to upgrade safety?
No, I just don't think
I got a borderline replacement grade on Jalen Petrie.
Yeah, you can't. I guess you can't upgrade everywhere. Well,
they could because they got CJ Stroud. They're paying him nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you paid Diggs something, and you definitely paid Danielle Hunter something. So I'll have to look at their cap stuff. But yeah, secondary is obviously going to be our lowest rating for any of the 3 defensive groups. I think that isn't some hot take, and I don't think I'm putting words in your mouth once we get there. But yeah, run stop. Azeez El-Shahir matters. That helps. The losing Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins hurts. We'll see how Autry and Fatukasi, I don't know how to say this guy's name. Never have, never will. And Denzel Perryman, that was the one. Denzel Perryman was a big part of the run stop. Probably Cashman too. I think he went to Minnesota as well with Greenard. So you lost some guys who had good run stop grades, and you didn't do much at safety. So yeah, I'm a little lower than you.
Okay. Pass rush was tough for me.
Really?
I think this unit is a little overrated because I don't think the interior pressure is going to be there.
That's kind of exactly what everyone's poking holes at because it's like, man, you have really good edges. I still had to go 7 because Danielle Hunter.
7?
Yeah. I think it's really good edge. And I wanted to ding him because I think it might struggle because of the secondary. But at the same time, I'm already going to ding the secondary, so I didn't want to double count that. I went high. Neil, yeah, Neil
I
Hunter.
think I'll be honest with you. I think Will Anderson's a little overrated.
I think if they can use him like they did last year, where he didn't have to play all that, he got him in when he was going to be effective. That's going to be great.
I think Hunter is an upgrade, but I think he's a little overrated. I don't see the interior pressure coming from these guys as much as I think they're fine upgrades over what they had. Yeah, I mean, like really, like the I don't see the building blocks of what made the San Francisco 49ers so scary under Ryans on defense from a pass rush standpoint, at least not with this unit. So if there's one kind of overrated unit, I think that's it. And you're saying 7. I'm only at 5.5 for pass rush.
5.5. This is our biggest gap in a while.
Yeah, I mean, you're counting on like situational contributions from Jerry Hughes still. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm prepared to be.
Okay.
I'm prepared to be quick to upgrade this. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Autry had 12 sacks last year. He's been good enough in the middle. I think they could have done more, like you said, at the defensive tackle, the center of the defensive line, because you got Will Anderson Jr., you got Daniil Hunter. Like, you're going to be fine off the edge, but Foley and Autry, I have is good enough where I'm not super worried. And God, who's the other guy? Harris at linebacker? I had a note on him too. Harris is more of a note on he can definitely help in coverage as well. But having Aziz El-Shaair, again, that was going to be a big part of the run stop, but he can help up front as well.
Okay.
So
all right, maybe I'm too low.
I'm putting it mostly off the fact that you have like two legit edge guys and good enough players at the second level to not have to worry about filling in, in the middle with a true eat 'em up, a eat 'em up guy in the middle, or a true blue interior pressure guy. Whereas I thought Autry's probably close enough to that for me to be happy.
Just out of curiosity, Will Anderson was 21st last year in pressures with 32.
Not bad.
Not bad.
No, and Hunter too. Hunter was kind of a weird one because that defense was hard to grasp. They were so aggressive early, because they had to be, because they hadn't figured it out and they sucked just ass. And you had Flores, who's a guy who's aggressive, but Flores backed off the blitz extreme in games down the stretch, and we still saw some decent production. He had a good game against Cincinnati. Looking at pressures here, it's so hard to use like pressures per games. Yeah. He just constantly got pressures no matter who they were up against. So he's good. He's very, very good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Maybe I'm low. Yeah, I'm gonna bump him up to 6. You twisted my arm. Coverage number
4.
Okay. I'm at 4.5. Mostly because I think they've got a CB1.
They do.
And I don't know what else.
From there, Okudah has been on 3 teams for a reason. Lassiter is a rookie.
Sounds like Lassiter is going to start over Okudah.
Yeah, I think that's probably the move. Like Okudah, I didn't see a ton of good out of him when he was in Atlanta. Henderson, Lassiter, second rounder, Georgia. So I had some notes here. Maybe it was from Football Outsiders. A lot of people in the draft thought he'd be a slot guy, but it appears that he could also play boundary. He did a lot of that in the combine. They did stick him out wide in the combine. He was fine. So I think you might have a very young 1-2 on outside corners. And then from there, like you said, the safeties aren't great. Kalen Bullock might end up playing because of what Jimmy Ward and Petrie are fine to just slightly below fine, I think is where I'm at. But at times, Petrie can be bad.
Okay. I agree with that. Special teams for you?
Special teams.
By the way, we're both at 55th percentile for defense. We got there different ways.
This is another plus. This is a 6.5.
Really? Oh.
Fairbairn was good when Fairbairn's good when he's
I was
healthy.
just going to go with what your number was, so I guess I got to go with that.
Yeah, you got to go with this because he was very good when he wasn't injured. He made 96.4 of his field goal attempts. 11 of 12 from 50 plus over the last 2 years. They went and got Tommy Townshend from the Chiefs, who's maybe on the decline, but still pretty decent. Damian Pierce is a good kick returner. And then Steven Sims, if you remember him, he scored in the playoff game on a punt return. But again, there's like 900 wide receivers on this roster. We'll see if he's even on the final 53.
What's your intangibles?
5.5.
Okay.
I don't know how quickly I can take a guy, despite what the voters thought of him in Coach of the Year and what we think of him, and just suddenly say he's like a top 10 coach. I've only seen it for 1 year. This isn't a heavily weighted part of this.
No,
I'm waiting 5% for coaching and intangibles. And yes, a great backup kicker too, Donaldson. Good call on that. I brought it up like 3 times already that he's kicked. So I'm a 5. I like him.
I'm only at a 4.
Oh.
So 2 things. I didn't see lots of obvious doing things analytically, or at least exercising like smart decision making. And I had them tabbed last year as a team that, if plan A worked, awesome. If it didn't, the adjustments really were not that great in game.
Sure. I attributed more of that to Slowick. I know what you're saying.
But defense too. Like both. But certainly like the staff as a whole, I didn't feel like did great things to adjust when things were going well versus when they were not. And best example is probably the playoff game against the Ravens. Like they got outcoached like pretty cleanly in that game.
Yeah, and that's one I'm gonna give him like, hey, you're a first year head coach, and the other guy is John Harbaugh.
Yeah, right. So Harbaugh's going to get more than a 4.
You should. Yeah, I was going to say you should be getting outcoached in something like that. That's where I was fine saying like, because again, I looked at it and I said, if I'm looking at every coaching staff and every game planning squad and every, all the things it takes to put together the product on Sunday, like, are there seriously 16 of those I would take over what I'm getting down in Texas right now in Houston? Probably not. Like, but I started counting them and it was close. And then I dinged them a little for, like you said, we don't have a big sample size on it yet. We saw some of the, I can blame Slowick, but the buck stops at Ryan. So we saw some of those games where it was like, that was a bad game plan and you guys just kept doing it. And that's why you lost the game. So I elevated it a little, be like, there's probably only like 12 coaches I'd take out of the staff.
Okay.
But again, it's still early. So just plumb in the middle for me, I guess.
Okay. You are at the 65th percentile. I'm at the 63rd percentile overall. That makes them a plus 4.5 team for you.
I had 5.
And I'm at plus 4. So that's pretty goddamn good. Wow.
Yeah. Favored by 1.5 on a neutral against my Atlanta Falcons, which is my previous high team before this one.
You know what? You're not getting a minus 1.5 against the Falcons on a neutral. You're getting 3, 2.5, 3. It's going to be bigger than that.
Yeah, I was a lot higher on the Falcons than you, wasn't I? With that quarterback stuff.
Here's where the shit hits the fan. This schedule.
Look how this schedule starts, though.
No, I know, but overall,
it's tough overall. Very tough. It could be top 5 worst.
There are positives. you get 3 rookies in your first 6 games. Well, 2 in Darnold, I guess, right? 3 if you want to count the fact that I guess Richardson hasn't finished his rookie year. Yeah, you're a favorite in all those games.
Darnold
Small favorite in all those games.
Difference there?
No, not really. The only kind of gimme, I think, you can argue about this, but the only gimme that I see is really the New England and the Tennessee games. Everything else is going to be pretty hard fought. And then, really like from week 7 on, this gets super interesting. You're taking on some really good quarterbacks in particular, and quarterbacks with a lot of weapons to throw to, and or just an elite weapon. And so I guess like there are matchups that I really am excited about, like at Jets at Dallas, where there's just one good weapon in Garrett Wilson and CD Lamb, and you can do Stingley v. You can match strength with strength. And if they're dogs in those games, that's probably a bet on Houston, right? But then there's games like Detroit and Green Bay where there's a bunch of strength. And there I don't like Houston as much.
I don't know what the line is right now. I know you make these, earlier and things move. And granted, they're summer lines, so they're pretty soft as it is. But getting over a field goal at home with Minnesota is something I like. And this will obviously change a lot depending on how ugly the quarterback situation's looking when we get there. But like we talked about, this could be a weak secondary versus a good wide receiver room. This is a very strong edge rushing team versus a Minnesota team that has a top 3 tackle duo. If anything, they're weak at the guard spots. If you can't get interior pressure, maybe Sam Darnold does kind of roast your ass. And again, it's a team with some decent pieces up front. They could probably get some pressure on some of the weak spots of this offensive line. Like Minnesota deserves to be a dog even at home, but getting over a field goal there feels pretty good in that spot because of some of those, micro matchups, whatever you want to call them. So there's definitely a few spots where there's some teams that could have their number, at least as a against the spread, standpoint.
Yeah. Tough travel in the middle.
Teams. So many tough teams. Well, it's a first place schedule. So
Yeah. Tough travel in the middle. Really tricky navigating rest in around Thanksgiving, and then quite the gauntlet of Miami, KC, Balto in 15, 16, 17. That either sharpens you for the playoffs or pops your hopes if somebody else in your division is playing well, I think.
Yeah, I feel bad for Tennessee there. Although Tennessee's great as a spoiler late. I guess they have a different coaching staff. Maybe it's not so much without Vrabel, but boy, after that stretch, you just got to be love playing a bad team at that point. Although Andy was kind of keen on that defense.
Yeah. Do you agree with me that Houston is good enough to give the Cowboys a test in the middle of the season?
For sure.
And then how do you feel about them going up against elite quarterbacks at the end of the season?
See, and this is where I wonder, too, where you got Kansas City, who's like a way, way, way better version of Minnesota, even if you don't rate their wide receivers well. You have Kelsey, where you have a strong weapon, obviously an elite quarterback, and good enough tackles to stop what they're doing from the edge. Yeah. So, like, Kansas City is a gross matchup on the road late in the season if they're healthy, obviously, for anybody. But it's just, all the little things that you're great at. We'll see what Kansas City looks like with a revamped secondary, losing one of their important pieces back there. But they still have a good pass rush. They have some good pieces up front. And obviously they have Patrick Mahomes. So that's an ugly spot when it's sandwiched between 2 other good teams.
Yep. I'm there.
Can we just talk up Kansas City? Get my hot take out of the way.
No, I think there's the spots where they're dogs, especially the Jets and the Cowboys, look really interesting to me. And then I'm probably going with Detroit. I'm probably going with Green Bay against them. That whole middle section of the season, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, I'm going to bet every one of those games. on Green Bay. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do with Houston, Indy. On Houston at the Jets.
Yeah, I was going to say, you love
on
Indy.
Detroit and on Houston at Dallas. Probably going to take Indy plus the 4.
We'll see.
Ooh, this is going to be great. There can be a lot of Texans in our lives this year, man.
Well, none of that, but yeah, triple primetime games in a row, 9, 10, 11 there. You have the Christmas game. You have the early Sunday night football. You can see them a lot in primetime as well. As deserved. It's a good team.
Dude, that Houston... Wait, can you go back 1 second?
Yep. Sorry, I clicked it.
There is 4 days rest between KC and Baltimore. Yikes. It's a Wednesday, I'm guessing.
Oh, actually, yeah, I misspoke when I said standalone games because that Saturday game against Kansas City is standalone in the week before Christmas because they need to give them an extra day to get ready for
the Christmas game.
Wednesday Christmas, I believe.
Yeah, sounds right. That's good.
Yeah, that Saturday to Wednesday.
That's going to be intense.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, you have the 2 best teams in the AFC back-to-back in 4 days.
Yeah.
Ish.
True or false? CJ Stroud wins those 2 games, he's the MVP.
I think so. Jesus. Go to Arrowhead and win and then take down Baltimore on Christmas ahead of everybody. We talk about this all the time, how the MVP is, it seems like sit on the knife's edge right until those last 5 weeks, and then somebody either wins it or loses it. And boy, he would have to be under criminal investigation to not be strongly considered with those 2 wins.
Okay. So let's talk about now. This team is very good. We like the early part of their schedule. Mm-hmm. They're a bet on some weeks. They're a bet against some weeks. They have a very tough schedule in the middle and end. This is all baked in. And in fact, I think the market is a little hot on them. Texans are minus 226 to make the playoffs. Plenty of outcomes where, they're kind of on the knife's edge for a wild card with 9 or 10 wins. Plenty of outcomes. That is a meaty part of their distribution of outcomes is 9, 10 wins. 11 cleanly in, obviously, but 12 cleanly in. But that's a lot of things going right. Their regular season win number, we just saw the sum of all of the money lines across the full look-ahead market was 9. Their over-under is 9.5, and it's been bet up to minus 142 to the over. Not enough conviction that the Texans are overrated for me to take under 9.5 at plus 1.
I was going to say, I don't want to get in front of that train, but certainly not laying juice the other way.
No. Their futures price for the AFC South, minus 112. Do you have the after talking about the Colts and the Jags and the Tits, you still want to know there?
Yeah, not after I talked about the Jags. Like I said, I have the Colts as my second best team, and I don't have the Titans that far behind the Jags, honestly, in my rankings.
Okay. There's a lot of this team controlling its own destiny.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of meaningful opinion on them getting the 1 seed? You think it's in the range of outcomes, right?
It's in the range of outcomes, but man, with the schedule being what it is in those late games against 3 really high-end contenders, like if you want to bet for them to get the 1 seed or win the AFC or something, I think you just take some prices versus those teams.
Just so everybody knows, we are going to take all of the ratings once we've got them all, and we're going to sim the season, and we're going to actually compare prices. But it
should be fun.
I think, I'm just guessing with a plus 4.5 and with plus 4.5 type of team and this schedule, I'm going to come up with something like 10% chance they're the 1 seed. So anything better than 10-1 for the 1 seed is a bet. They're 8-1 right now at DK.
Yeah. I don't know that and Grinch 26 asks which books have Houston no. I don't know
Probably
that anyone
Circa.
has. Circa would, but I don't know if anything,
if they're up yet.
If it's up or if any of the other domestics or offshores honestly have that. But if you Google the words Dutching calculator, You're going to click on one of the first, maybe the Smarkets one is the best one, I think. You can make a synthetic one with, say, I want to bet $100 against them. You just find your very best price and the other 3 teams to win the division. It'll tell you how to split your stake up. And you can make a synthetic no. And honestly, sometimes, not just sometimes, I feel like a majority of the time you can get a better price that way because you're finding ways to overcome the vig a little by shopping on 3 different prices. All it takes is, a slightly better price in all 3, and you can suddenly knock that down 3, 4, 5% and maybe get a plus number on that.
The divisional market numbers are juicy, and honestly, it's
a hot
schedule start. The fact that they start out with so many kind of young and experienced quarterbacks doesn't really have me super into it.
I was wondering about that. Maybe if we do fade Houston, it's done at some point mid-season where we're seeing glimpses. What?
Texans at circa is minus 145.
Yeah, you can make a better price than that.
Ugh.
Now I'm going to hunt that down and see what the best price is. I'll put it in the Discord. Maybe not tonight. I got to go pack for vacation.
Puke. Okay. All right. Well, do you see yourself buying into the Texans at any point to win the AFC or the Super Bowl this year, depending on what the eyeball test is telling you? Or do you think they need a couple more runs through the kind of playoff ringer to kind of get some experience with the staff, to get some more experience with some of the young core, to get CJ Stroud some more experience in a high leverage playoff game?
In the middle of the schedule here, and I pulled the schedule back up, if they start, because I'm going to say, they need to show it to me versus the teams I need to see it against. But if they start doing it, the price is going to go with them.
Yeah, of course.
So look at there's an every other week stretch here where it's Buffalo, New England, Green Bay, Indy, Jets, at the Jets, and then Jets, Detroit, Dallas. At what point there in those 5 games where if they have 2, 3 really good outcomes where they look like they've put together a good game plan and have everything it takes to beat some of these other, those are all playoff teams.
Yeah. Okay, you ready? Here's my short and sweet answer. If they beat the Buffalo Bills in week 5, not going to move the needle for me. Okay. Buffalo doesn't give a shit what's going on that time of season. Buffalo is now the type of team that isn't going to care about shit until November, right?
Fair.
Green Bay, if I bet on Green Bay and they just take care of business against Green Bay and their pass defense is not exposed, then I'm going to feel a little stupid and I'm going to have to upgrade Houston a bit. If they beat the Lions with what the Lions have going on with that offense, even at home, I'm going to bet the Lions that game almost surely. If they take care of business against the Lions week 10, then I think the jig is up. Something special is going on because then all of the weak, all of your small strengths against their weaknesses, if you can still overcome strength on strength type of stuff in that game and their strength on your weakness in that game, then I think you're for real.
I was going to say, obviously I'm going to have a way big disparity in the offensive lines between Green Bay and Detroit, but I'm not so sure I'm going to have those offensive ratings all that differently.
Yeah, same.
I was going to say, if you do it against Green Bay, I'm looking at that Detroit number and wondering if I should be backing Houston there. Against what happens when you get Darling versus Darling? Because those are darlings, man.
Yeah, it's a good point. Okay.
Anything else on Houston? What else you got?
Not really. I think that covers it. I guess I'm softly because of how talented they are and how quickly the market has upgraded them, in a world where there's a letdown this year because of an injury or just because of an ineffectiveness or just because of growing pains, because of schedule, bad luck, just luck, right? Fumble luck. Who the fuck cares? If there's growing pains this year and there's a little bit of a, the rose, the bloom is off the rose for these guys, this is going to be like the kind of team that you go immediately to the well with in 2025, right? Like if there's a sophomore slump, CJ Stroud has a sophomore slump. You're going hard to the well.
Going ham.
Texans, going ham on the Texans in year 3, right?
Yeah. Oh man, can Levis really win this division 2 years in a row, guys? I think I'm a Titans fan. Boy, that feels gross.
Yeah.
So, all right, appreciate you guys. We'll do more of these next week. We're on to another division. And if you watched in the YouTube, hit the thumbs up. If you listen in podcast form, leave us a 5-star rating. That helps. If we missed anything, if you disagree, if you have a hot take, if you have a young rookie, anything you wanted to mention, leave it in the YouTube notes. Leave it in the Twitter machine, however you want to do it. For me, for Drew. See you next week.
Big news happens. Don't hold it against us.
Yeah, sorry.
If the Dak Prescott breaks his ankle or something, don't hold it against us.
Do.